Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Fellow Show. I'm your host, the Fellow KGB. You can follow me on Twitter at the Fellow KGB. And tonight it is Wednesday evening, the 18th of November. It's 6 o'clock p.m. Central Time. We're going to be going over my Thursday night football game preview. We got a really good one on Thursday night football. We got the Cardinals at the Seattle Seahawks. This game, we already had one of these games earlier this year. I think it was the Sunday night football game, and it was a doozy. So there should be a lot of fun in this one, a lot of fantasy points. We're going to look at some practice reports. We're going to go over some of the notes from the last game that these two played between each other. And then we're just going to kind of, I guess, roll over my start sit chart. So I'm going to hop into a screen share over on the fantasyfellowship.com. And we'll just click into the Week 11 start sit charts here. I did post my schedule for the YouTube the rest of the week. We'll kind of see what happens next week with Thanksgiving kind of being a weird schedule day. But we do have Thursday Night Football, Cardinals and Seattle Seahawks. There's going to be a lot of guys that we want to get into this one for fantasy football. And then I do list the fantasy points allowed to the quarterbacks and all the other positions here. But before we get to that, I want to read over the practice report for this one. We got a couple important news pieces here. We'll start with Seattle because there's a couple more people probably not playing in this one. So they already did. I mean, they're pretty much ruling out Chris Carson in this one. They have him listed as questionable, but I think he's just probably not going to play. So you see Chris Carson up here, questionable with the foot injury. He didn't practice today, so not a good sign. We're probably going to be without Chris Carson again for this week. And then you do have Carlos Hyde down here, who's been logging full practices yesterday and today. So it looks like Carlos Hyde is probably going to be the lead back in this one. They did list Travis Homer here as doubtful. He practiced yesterday, but then not today. So that's not a good sign there. So that's probably going to leave the Seahawks with Carlos Hyde, Alex Collins, and then the rookie DJ Dallas. So that's going to probably be the pecking order for snaps and touches tomorrow night in that one. And then as far as receivers here, Tyler Lockett was questionable. He didn't practice yesterday. He got limited in today. So I guess that's a good progression that we want to see there. So the expectation is that he will play. I'm not really sure how difficult the knee injury is going to be for him to play. So he might just be a little bit limited. I don't know if he's going to get a full snap count or what. But if you remember Tyler Lockett, we were kind of, I was going to go over this in a second here, but earlier in the year, 34-37, Arizona wins in overtime. And this was the Tyler Lockett 50 burger. If you play in PPR leagues, 15 catches, 200 yards, and 3 touchdowns, pretty much leaving nothing for DK Metcalf. So we have a banged up Tyler Lockett this week. I think this was the game that Chris Carson got hurt. So he's probably not going to play in this one. So you see Carlos Hyde did have some success on the ground against the Cardinals in this one. And then on the opposite side here, you see Kyler Murray blow it up for 360 yards, 3 touchdowns, and interception. The running backs here, I think this was the game that Kenyon Drake got hurt in as well. So Chase Edmonds was the highlight of this one. He had 5 carries, 58 yards, broke a 32 off here. And then in the receiving game, you see Chase Edmonds go 7 for 87. Of course, DeAndre Hopkins got his with 10 for 103 and a touchdown. Larry Fitzgerald had a pretty good game. Christian Kirk had 5 for 37 and 2 touchdowns. So there's a lot of pieces for fantasy football in this one that we like to probably get into our lineups. And then with the whole Tyler Lockett in the knee situation right now, I'm wondering if DK Metcalf gets a little bit more action than he did back in this. I think this was week 7. But only 2 for 23 for DK Metcalf on 5 targets. He did have a touchdown call back in that one. There was kind of a questionable blocking call, so he might have had a good enough fantasy day there for us. But overall, both quarterbacks threw 3 touchdowns, both over 350 yards actually. And then both teams had some success on the ground here. So I don't know if we're going to see quite the fantasy bonanza that we saw in week 7, but it should be a really good show here. So I guess before we get to the start sit charts, I did want to just look at couple other guys here. There's a center out for the Seahawks, a guard out here. I think these are just backups here. Shaq Griffin's going to be out, and Quentin Dunbar is going to be out. So they're down 2 of their best cornerbacks. And then on the Arizona side of things, let's look at this real quick. They have ruled out Justin Murray, Corey Peters, and Jordan Phillips. I think these guys are all kind of secondary role players here. So nothing too crazy on the Cardinals side of things. Daryl Daniels questionable at tight end. Max Williams questionable at tight end. A safety here. So overall, the fantasy health is pretty good for the Cardinals. So let's get into the start-sit charts. You got the Cardinals on the left, Seahawks on the right here. And then down here, I do list the fantasy points allowed to each position. And you see quite a bit of green matchups here. We did just go over the ESPN game log from this Week 7 game. Both quarterbacks, or both teams, allow quite a bit of quarterback points. You see the green and the green there. The Cardinals are better against the running backs here, only about 22 PPR points to the running backs. And the Seahawks are towards the bottom here, about 25. So not that much difference, but 3 points is kind of a big deal in fantasy football sometimes. So the Cardinals a little bit stingier. The Seahawks, you can run against them. Both teams are very bad against the wide receivers. You see the Cardinals here about 41.3 PPR points to the receivers, and then the Seahawks are clearly the worst team against the wide receivers here. 57.4 points, PPR points to the wide receiver position here. So we're going to love all the options there on the Cardinals side of things. And then both teams are pretty good against the tight end. The Cardinals allow about 10.5 points to the tight end. Seahawks a little bit better at 9.2. So we really don't trust either team's tight ends. They kind of have a committee situation going on in both. So how do we attack this game? On the Cardinal side of things, I mean, basically at both sides, you're going to take Murray and you're going to take Russell Wilson. Those guys are going to be in your lineups for sure. I don't really have a good read on either team's running back situation, so I have them all listed as flexes. So Kenyon Drake, Chase Edmonds, Carlos Hyde, Alex Collins. I did want to pull up the opportunity report from last week because we did have a game with Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds all back in the backfield together. So this was Drake's first game back in I think maybe 2 or 3 weeks. He comes in and gets more snaps, 38 snaps to 36 Edmonds snaps, 16 carries for 100 yards last week. Edmonds only gets 8 for 56. So Edmonds is still playing good. He's still catching targets here. He's still getting, a good amount of PPR points here for you. And then Kenyon Drake, just 1 catch, 1 target, 9 yards. And he did have a costly fumble here. But for the most part, it's probably going to continue to be a 50-50 split, I would imagine. And with Chase Edmonds, he's going to get more targets, more catches, so he still has a pretty safe floor in PPR leagues. If you started Chase Edmonds last week, this would have been what? 5.1, 5.6, 10.7 points. That's still a flexible RB2, low-end RB2 number. And then with Kenyon Drake here, you're going to get the 10 points here, -2 for the fumble, so 8 and 1.9. So each guy got about 10 points last weekend. And just looking back at the box score from before, I do like both guys here as low-end RB2 flexes. And if this game kind of gets, blown out of proportion again, and there's a potential for overtime and a lot of throwing the ball around, that's going to favor Chase Edmonds, especially if the Seahawks get a lead early. So I like both Kenyon Drake and both Chase Edmonds. We did say that the Seahawks are vulnerable against, they're pretty much vulnerable against everything against tight end. So you're going to like both Drake and Edmonds for high floors tomorrow night. And then with the receivers, of course, you're starting DeAndre Hopkins in the Hail Mary play last weekend. You're not going to bench DeAndre Hopkins at all. So the one guy that did let us down last weekend was Christian Kirk. Just looking at the opportunity report again, he was third in snaps with 54 snaps here, 74%, 6 targets, 4 catches, 27 yards. So 6.20 or 6.7 fantasy points there. A little bit more to be desired from Christian Kirk. I'm not sure if they were looking for him deep at all on that one. I didn't get to rewatch that game at all. But other than last weekend, Christian Kirk has been on a roll, and he's been a pretty consistent guy for us in our lineup. So you see basically all the way back to week 2, that was his worst game since, the second game of the season. So he's had 3 straight 20-point games, a 10 and a 12 up here, and an 8. So I got to think that he's going to continue to have a floor of 6 to 8 points. And then, against Seattle, he did catch 2 touchdowns. If he goes 5 for 37, that's a decent floor again there. So it's a matter of him scoring touchdowns in this one. But I like his chances, so he should be in our lineups as a wide receiver 3. And then I do have Larry Fitzgerald here. Just because we saw earlier in the year, I think Larry Fitzgerald ended up with like 7 or 8 catches in this one. Let me just pull him up. I just want to make sure. And if we're expecting this game to kind of be a shootout, a lot of passing numbers for both quarterbacks, I do think Larry Fitzgerald can be a guy that we can use. Last weekend wasn't a very good game for him in Buffalo. But the week before that, Miami, 4 for 54. And against Seattle here, he did catch all 8 of his targets for 62 yards. So Kyler Murray threw the ball around a ton. So if you're desperate and you need to get a wide receiver 3 in there or something like that, maybe Larry Fitzgerald could be your guy here. So I just have him there with a question. We're not using the Cardinals defense. We're not interested in the tight ends or Andy Isabella. So it's a pretty straightforward fantasy evaluation. Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, for sure. Christian Kirk can be a wide receiver 3 flex. Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, they both kind of have the same value. I think I like Chase Edmonds a little bit more in a PPR league. And then maybe consider Larry Fitzgerald there if you need some help at wide receiver. So on the Seattle Seahawks side of things, it's another pretty simple evaluation here. Cardinals give up quarterback points. and they give up wide receiver points here. So that just plays right into the strengths here. Russell Wilson, he's going to be a top 5 option this weekend as well. With Tyler Lockett, I'm not really sure how to evaluate this. He's questionable. He's going to play, it sounds like, tomorrow for sure. And I mean, he's not going to get, the 53-point game that we got last time. He's already a little bit dinged up in this one. I would imagine the Cardinals defense is I mean, they know what Tyler Lockett did to them. They're not going to let this happen again. So I'm thinking the Seahawks are going to go into this one and try to figure out, how do we get DK Metcalf the ball? And then this has actually been a problem with DK Metcalf. He's played against the Cardinals 3 times in his career so far. And I'm just pulling up the website StatMuse. You just type in the player who they're playing against, and we're just going to add the word game log. And you're going to see what DK Metcalf has done in his career against the Cardinals. So 3 games, only 3 career catches, and 29 yards. So he has not been – this is easily his worst team that he's had to play against in a few years. So I'm not excited about DK Metcalf, but if you think about what happened earlier this year, it was all Tyler Lockett. I'm curious what Tyler Lockett has done against the Cardinals in these last few seasons here. So last year, even Tyler Lockett was kind of stifled. Only 1 for 12, 4 for 54. So kind of this blow up game out of nowhere. So I'm thinking the Seahawks, they know they need to get DK Metcalf involved more. He was not involved last week, and I'd be shocked if they don't find a way to get him the ball more often in this one. I'll be curious to see if Patrick Peterson just locks on to DK Metcalf. But like I talked about at the beginning of the show, DK Metcalf actually, he scored a touchdown that got called back in week 7 in this game. So I'm optimistic that DK Metcalf can be back into our good graces as a wide receiver 2 or 3 in this one. So you're starting Lockett, you're starting DK Metcalf. The one guy that does interest me a little bit here is going to be David Moore. And he's actually had a couple good games in a row now. I don't think he had a very good game. The whole team, struggled last weekend. But before they ran into the Rams defense, David Moore was starting to come on a little bit. And if you think that this game's going to be another 30-point, high-scoring affair, potential overtime game, you do see David Moore kind of come into here with 17.1, 13.6, 8.8. It looks like he did not play in the Seattle game, so no, he did play in the Arizona game. So he goes 3 for 54. He even got a carry in that one. So he puts up an 8.8 floor. It wouldn't surprise me if Tyler Lockett's dinged up a little bit. Maybe David Moore gets a little bit more attention in the target department, a little bit more volume his way. So I'm open to David Moore as being a really deep wide receiver 3 flex option. And then with the running backs here, let's just pull up the Week 10 opportunity report. Just roll down here to Seattle. I'm curious to see the total snap counts for Alex Collins. So where are we? So Alex Collins last weekend, 32 snaps, 48%. To DJ Dallas, he was the number 2 back with 22 snaps, 33%. 11 carries for Collins, only 2 for DJ Dallas. 2 targets, 3 targets. So I would imagine they're going to kind of use and they've already pretty much said Travis Homer's not going to play in this one. So we're going to have Carlos Hyde, Alex Collins, and DJ Dallas. I would imagine Dallas kind of moves down to the Homer line here. Collins goes down to the Dallas line. And you're probably going to see Carlos Hyde get anywhere between 10 to 15 touches, almost 50% of the snap load. And like I said before, we did look at the game here before, and we saw Carlos Hyde had a pretty nice day against these Cardinals here. I'm just pulling that back up right now. And we'll kind of just go over those stats from back in week 7 here. So just looking at the box score, you see, I can't remember when Chris Carson got hurt. It might have been on the end of the first drive, but Carlos Hyde he filled in really well. 15 carries, 68 yards, and a touchdown. He added a catch for 3 catches for 8 yards here. So that was a really solid day for Carlos Hyde owners. No one probably started him, but in this one, if he's 100% good to go, he's practicing in full. Maybe Carlos Hyde gets a little bit more carries and more run in this one. And then as far as tight ends down here, we're not super excited to start Will Dissly or Jacob Hollister or Greg Olsen. They kind of use all these guys in different ways here. But you see Greg Olsen, 72% snaps, Will Dissly, 36. Jacob Hollister, only 9% snaps here. If you had to pick one guy to start as a tight end, like streaming option, Greg Olsen's the one getting the snaps here. So if you had to, I think that's how I would roll here. We're not concerned with these backup running backs here. So this one should be a really fun game here. I did want to kind of just look and see, use FF today and kind of see how teams have been playing lately. So the Seahawks, I mean, everyone knows the Seahawks have one of the most inexperienced secondaries. They allow a lot of points, a lot of yards, a lot of everything. So I'm just kind of curious to see Last weekend, they limited Jared Goff to no touchdowns. Jared Goff still threw for 300 yards, but they let Josh Allen rip him up for 415. Nick Mullins and Jimmy Garoppolo, they kind of got the best of them in this game, but they still allowed the 49ers to throw for over 300 yards, another 360 here for Kyler Murray, 250 and 2 touchdowns for Kirk Cousins. That's a pretty good game for the Vikings passers. And then, there's a really good chance that Kyler Murray throws for another 300 yards and in 2 or 3 touchdowns here. You see some of the scores here. I think Kyler Murray is going to be a really good play tomorrow night. And then let's just take a look at the Cardinals here and see how they've been doing against quarterbacks lately. So last weekend, they played against Josh Allen, 284 yards, 2 touchdowns. Tua Tagovailoa, 248, 2 touchdowns. Russ Wilson, 388 and 3. And then Andy Dalton even threw for 266 and a touchdown here. So it's looking like a really high floor. You see some pretty good numbers here. Again, Josh Allen, Tua, Russell Wilson. These have been some of their previous matchups here. So I'm thinking both quarterbacks are a lock for 20 points. Both have great chances and odds at 300-yard games and multiple touchdowns. So a ton of fun here. First place is on the line in the NFC West. So the schedule makers did a really good job this weekend. I don't know if they knew, looking forward here that Kyler Murray was going to take such a nice step. But we got Arizona, Seattle. We got a handful of noon games here. I'm going to be carefully watching Tennessee, Baltimore. That's got playoff implications in it. We'll see if New England can kind of keep going here. So there's a lot to like here in the noon slate. And then as far as the 3 o'clock games, you got Green Bay and Indianapolis. That's a really fun playoff. Both teams are in the playoffs. We'll see if Tua can keep winning. And then it's all capped off by Kansas City at Las Vegas. That's going to be a revenge game for the Chiefs, who lost at home earlier this year to the Raiders. And then Tampa Bay and the Los Angeles Rams here. So there's a lot of playoff teams playing each other. If we just look at the playoff standings here, the Raiders are a 5 seed, Colts are a 4 seed. They both have tough matchups this weekend, so that could open up, things for teams like Baltimore and Tennessee. The loser of this game all of a sudden is going to probably drop down to 9th or 10th in the AFC. So there's a lot of jockeying for position here. We could see New England move up to 5-5. We could see Tennessee drop to 6-4. The Cleveland Browns going up against the Eagles. That's a lot. There's a lot of playoff jockeying for position. And same thing in fantasy football leagues. I think we're in a really good spot this year. It's week 11, so you kind of know what's on your schedule the next 3 weeks. You should know how many points you have to get if you have the option to get into the playoffs on points, or you're just kind of looking around at records. So overall, pretty exciting Thursday night football game. I think if anyone has any questions in the chat room, you can go ahead and fire away there. I think I'm just going to kind of pull up some information and some news that we'll have on Roto World here. But if you're new to the Fellow KGB channel and the Fantasy Fellowship, go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel. I do have my YouTube schedule posted here on the website. We're going live pretty much 5 days a week at 6 o'clock Central Time here. And then on Saturdays, I have to sync up with my friend Jesse. And I'll probably announce that time on Thursday or Friday once I talk to him about it. But overall, we're pumping out a lot of content. We'll be going live tomorrow to talk about all of the noon games here. So if you are new to the Fellowship, fantasyfellowship.com, I have my week 11 start sit charts all ready to go. You can check those out and all the fantasy points allowed to the positions there. But we're going to be talking about the Eagles and the Browns tomorrow night. We'll look at the Falcons and the Saints. Still don't know who's starting at quarterback for the Saints, so that's something to keep an eye on too. We got the Bengals in Washington. We'll see if Joe Burrow can overcome that pass rush. We're going to talk about the Lions-Panthers tomorrow night, as well as the Steelers-Jaguars. And then the Titans and the Ravens. That's probably my favorite noon game of the week. A lot of playoff implications in that one. And then Patriots-Texans, and that'll cover us up for tomorrow night's game. So we're just going to pop over to Roto World. I'm just going to kind of just read the news and see if anything sticks out or what potential new things we could find. So Joe Mixon held out of practice again today. This is getting frustrating here. He's week to week at this point. If he doesn't play, you're going to probably want to start Giovanni Bernard again in PPR leagues. Last weekend was a train wreck for the whole Bengals offense going up against Pittsburgh. A little bit easier matchup. The Washington football team is still pretty dang good with the pass rush and holding running backs and receivers to low points. So I'm assuming at this point, Joe Mixon's probably not going to play for us this weekend. We'll see more Giovanni Bernard and probably more Joe Burrow flinging around a lot of passes. We got good news today on Calvin Ridley. He was able to practice on a limited basis. We'll see if he can go back-to-back limiteds and then maybe a full by Friday. I think that would be a great week of practice to get Calvin Ridley back into the fold. They play against the Saints. So Atlanta, all of a sudden, Atlanta's kind of hanging around. I think they've won 3 games in a row. or at least 3 out of the last 4. So Atlanta's starting to come around here. They're still playing for Raheem Morris, and they have a lot to prove with Matt Ryan yet. So Calvin Ridley hopefully back in our lineups this weekend. Let's just keep moving on here. No Gardner Minshew this weekend. That means more Jake Luton. James Robinson limited today with a shoulder injury. That's the first time I've heard about it. So I don't know if this is just maybe kind of Wednesday is typically in the practice, scope of the week. Wednesday is typically that day off for a lot of banged up players or veteran players. So I'm thinking we'll see James Robinson full practice tomorrow. No Laviska Shenault today. It would make sense for him to practice tomorrow as well. But the Jaguars going up against the Steelers, we'll see what Jake Luton's made of, but I think they're going to lean heavily on James Robinson again in this one. Again, Chris Carson, unlikely to play tomorrow night. We're going to probably pivot towards Carlos Hyde. If you need a starting running back, Carlos Hyde, he rushed for a touchdown last time. He caught 3 passes, 60-some, rushing yards. He was a capable backup there. He can be your RB2 tomorrow night. No Matthew Stafford. He's got the ligament in the thumb in his throwing hand. So this is something that we definitely have to keep an eye on. We did see Kenny Golladay come back to practice today. Marvin Jones wasn't in practice today, but at least Galladay's back. That's a good sign that we're going to get him back in our lineups this weekend. You got Matt Breida coming back from a hamstring injury. That'll take maybe a little bit of steam off the Salvin Ahmed, but we'll see if he can go the rest of the week with the practice reports. Again, Tyler Lockett, questionable tomorrow night. It's leaning like he's going to play. I don't think there's anything too crazy. But it's all going to be Carlos Hyde, probably a lot of, DK Metcalf. That's probably going to be the staple points of the offense tomorrow night. No Danny Amendola at practice, so that's weird. No Danny, no Marvin, but Kenny Golladay does practice. So I guess that's a good thing there. So we got Stephen Drake's in the chat room asking, would you play Drake full PPR? What are your options to use besides Kenyon Drake? Kenyon Drake, he does have like a high floor in this one. I think teams can run on the Seattle Seahawks, and I'm trying to remember what Drake did. I think this was the game where he got hurt against the Seahawks earlier in the year. So I'm just curious what his numbers were. So he goes week 7, 14 carries, 34 yards, and just a catch in 7 yards here. So this was not a really high marquee game for him. If we're expecting this Seahawks and Cardinals game to be a high-scoring affair, I think that's going to favor Chase Edmonds to be on the field a little bit more in passing situations and maybe catch-up mode. So it really depends, Steven, who are your options that you could start over him. I'm kind of hesitant. He did look okay last weekend with his 16 carries and the 100 yards. But Buffalo, Seattle, they kind of have similar defenses here. It wouldn't surprise me to see Kenyon Drake have a nice game. But let's just see here. So they said Drake should get a bump up in offensive snaps this weekend. Yes, I was surprised that he got so many last weekend too. So it's looking like he's going to get a little bit more here. So it's actually flex, Drake or Robert Woods. So I'm a little bit nervous about Robert Woods in this one too, because Tampa Bay, they still have really good young cornerbacks. I don't really know what to expect from Jared Goff on Monday night. It's a much tougher matchup. Give me Kenyon Drake going up against Seattle versus Robert Woods kind of going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And for some reason, Josh Reynolds has been kind of coming along lately for the Seattle Seahawks or for the Los Angeles Rams. Cooper Kupp is still there. So I'm a little bit more nervous about Robert Woods going up against a tough defense in Tampa Bay. So I think I'm going to say Kenyon Drake makes sense for tomorrow night. And then, we were looking at the snap counts from last weekend with Arizona. And first game back for Kenyon Drake, I was surprised he was able to get as many snaps as he did. But 38 snaps for Drake, 36 for Chase Edmonds. He basically doubled him in touches, which was good to see. He fumbled, but they were still giving him some touches a little bit later in the game. So do we like Kareem Hunt this weekend? So let's just see. I'm going to roll down here looking for the Browns. Browns going up against the Eagles. I still think Kareem Hunt has a pretty high floor because of the PPR leagues. Let me just move that. So I do have Kareem Hunt listed as a RB2 in PPR leagues. If you look at the Eagles, though, they are one of the better teams going up against the running backs. And let's just kind of pull up here. So the thing that I noticed last weekend was it was Nick Chubb's first game back, and Kareem Hunt outsnapped him, had the same amount of carries, and then he also gets the more targets. So Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, it was almost, it was Kareem Hunt's backfield last week. Nick Chubb did get some carries, but I'm curious to see if it's another 50-50 split there. I did want to pull up and see. Let's just take a look and see how the Eagles have been going against running backs the last couple of weeks. Because if that game's going to be a tough game and we're expecting them to have to throw the ball, that's going to favor Kareem Hunt just a little bit in that one. So let's see here. going up against the Eagles. They're the 28th here. So let's just see the last few games here. Wayne Gallman had a 19-point game. Tony Pollard, 8.4. Wayne Gallman's got their number, apparently. But then Gus Edwards, James Conner, 15.3. McKinnon had a nice game against them. So I think if McKinnon can have a big game again, like they're used very similarly, it wouldn't surprise me to see Kareem Hunt have a nice day. We did see Wayne Gallman catch 5 passes there. Who else? Jerick McKinnon caught 7 of his 8 targets. So they do allow some guys to catch the ball here. I wouldn't be too afraid to start Kareem Hunt. As long as you just keep your expectations, real. He's best used as a flex, but I could see in a PPR league, I think RB2 numbers do make sense for Kareem Hunt. I'll probably talk a little bit more about that game in detail tomorrow night. But this is a really fun game here. The Browns are 6-3. The Eagles need to keep, their half-game lead in the NFC East, and they're getting healthier on offense. Zach Ertz has been activated off IR. I don't think he's going to play this weekend, but maybe next weekend. But anyways, Jalen Reagor, Travis Fulgham, Dallas Goedert. Eagles finally have a little bit of a healthy offense here, so we'll see if they can kind of keep it up. So we got another question here from our guy, Stephen Drakes. So would you start Christian Kirk, Carlos Hyde, and DJ Chark this week? Let's see. Who else are your options there, Mr. Drake? Is this all for one spot? Like, do we have to pick one? If I had to pick one, I do think DJ Chark could have a nice game against the Steelers. The Steelers have been allowing – if the way to attack the Steelers defense is you have to attack their secondary. So just looking at a fantasy points per game here for DJ Chark going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Steelers are down here at 23rd. So this is a green matchup for the Jaguars passing game. And just looking at some of the numbers of the receivers that they've allowed here, think about T. Higgins. He compares pretty nicely to a DJ Chark, 24.5. Some other big receivers here had some good games. A.J. Brown with 27.3. You see Steve Slayton, 28.2. So these are all guys that, they go vertical. So I kind of, it feels weird to want to root for a Jake Luton and Jacksonville offense, but I do think that you can take advantage of the Steelers secondary. And I mean, we expect that team to be losing. They're going to have to throw the ball at some point. So DJ Chark, it wouldn't surprise me if he's in the mold of these big play receivers who have been able to beat the Steelers. So I think DJ Chark has a pretty nice ceiling. As far as Christian Kirk, we did pull up and say that Christian Kirk scored 2 touchdowns against Seattle earlier in, I think it was week 7 when these two teams played here. And the positive thing about Christian Kirk is the numbers are indicating that, yeah, you should probably play Christian Kirk. Seattle is the worst team against the wide receiver, 57.4 PPR points allowed here. The next closest is Tennessee with 46. So they got an 11-point lead on the worst secondary here. So just look at the Seattle Seahawks individual numbers. Again, pretty much every receiver that they go against here has a pretty big day. Josh Reynolds had 17.4, Diggs 20.8, Ayuk 23.1, Hopkins back in that game had 26.3. But even, they usually allow at least 2 receivers, sometimes 3 receivers to hit double digits. So if we look back here, DeAndre Hopkins, of course, had the 26.3. Christian Kirk had the 2 touchdowns and went for 20.7. Even if you take one of those touchdowns away, he's still ending up with 13, 14 points. So I'm thinking we're going to see Christian Kirk maybe get vertical in this one. And then I did look at the practice reports here for Seattle. They've already ruled out 2 of their starting cornerbacks, so Shaq Griffin and Quentin Dunbar. So Seattle's the worst secondary in the league, and they're already down 2 cornerbacks. So I think I'm a fan of Christian Kirk, and then DJ Chark, and then probably Carlos Hyde, based on that those pecking order there. So we got another question here from our guy Sunny Lar Mayo. So someone offered him Jamal Williams, Rex Burkhead, and CeeDee Lamb for Chase Claypool. Should we take it? His roster is running backs Raheem Mostert, David Johnson, both injured, of course, Matt Breida, LaMichael Pirine, and Alex Collins. So someone's trying to send you Jamal Williams, Rex Burkhead, and CeeDee Lamb. And at the moment right now, you're probably starting Alex Collins and LaMichael Pirine. That's not the best situation to be. So if you're still here, Sonny, who are your other receivers at the moment? So you have Chase Claypool. Do you have a couple other players that you can at least float with to get receivers? If you can cash in on some Jamal Williams, Rex Burkhead's been scoring touchdowns lately, and CeeDee Lamb at least has a decent floor in PPR league, so I don't mind it. He doesn't have the touchdown upside of a Chase Claypool right now, but you could potentially get some serviceable points out of CeeDee Lamb. I mean, just looking at your running back roster right now, I would probably start Jamal Williams and Rex Burkhead as your starting running backs this weekend. And the thing with Jamal Williams is, even though he is the backup in Green Bay, they do run him about 40% of the snaps, and he's got a pretty high floor in PPR leagues. So hopefully this is a PPR league for you. I'm just looking for Jamal Williams' name here. So he's RB35 on the season, and just the last couple games here. So let's just look here. So I mean, this was a tough game for Green Bay. They weren't blowing this team out, and Jamal Williams comes in there, 8 carries, 30 yards. He's always going to get a good amount of catches here. So this was, 3 catches, 4 targets, 25 yards. He ends up with 8.5 points. So, I mean, this is a worst case scenario kind of game here. Maybe we see Jamal Williams hit another 6, 7, 8 point floor against the Colts. And then with Rex Burkhead, I mean, he's kind of their little nifty red zone back there. When they get close, they like to send him on some wheel routes and try to get him the ball in space. So I think I'm okay with this kind of trade here. And then, yeah, you got Kenny Golladay, Deebo Samuel, or is that Curtis Samuel, and then T. Higgins. So, I mean, in that scenario, you're going to probably be starting Kenny Golladay, he practiced today, so it looks like he's going to come back here. And then T. Higgins, man, like you just got to kind of leave T. Higgins in the lineup. He's been playing so great lately. I think he's finally in the top 25 of wide receivers. So I think you could probably get away with sending away Chase Claypool, especially if you're not really getting any other offers for running backs. You do have Raheem Mostert probably back next weekend. You do have David Johnson. I think he's got maybe 2 more weeks. So it does make sense if you want to plug in Jamal Williams or Rex Burkhead this week. So that's probably where I would go. If you need the help and there's no other good running backs on the waiver wire, I would probably take that trade. I did have a list of running backs available on my waiver wire chart, though, Sonny. If you wanted to look at the waiver wire report, I mean, if any of these running backs are available, I think you could probably spot start one of these guys. So whether that's McKissick, Damian Harris, we'll see about Salvon Ahmed, definitely Kalen Ballage. I think if you can get any of these 4 guys, I'd be open to just adding these guys and spot starting them, especially like McKissick in a full PPR league. I think that's a great spot there. And then it really depends. If you really like Claypool, it makes sense to hold on to him. But if you can get a spot starter running back here, I'm open to adding one of those guys on the waiver wire there. So thanks for the question, guys. Thanks for hanging out with me tonight. I don't know if anyone's into the NBA draft, but I'll probably be paying attention to that in a little bit here. We'll hang out for another maybe 5-10 minutes. As long as you guys got more questions, I'll keep hanging out. Moving on back to the practice reports here. Devontae Adams did not practice today. It sounds like he's probably going to be like limited at best the rest of the week. I think he's going to play. So it's interesting, though. It's a tough matchup. It wouldn't surprise me if they held him out, but I'm leaning towards Adams playing. Maybe he's a little bit limited this week. So we'll check out his reports on Thursday and Friday. Noah Fant today, a little bit he's been kind of dinged up the last 3 or 4 games, so I'm not really sure what happened this time. That does say he's been battling a high ankle sprain, so maybe this is just, the Wednesday practice periods are sometimes a little bit misinformative, because that's usually a day where they give some of their more banged up players a day of rest. They care more about practice participation on Thursday and Friday. So I think Noah Fant should be okay to go this weekend. We also have to watch about Drew Lock. I didn't see an update here yet, but we'll get to him in a little bit. And hey, man, no problem. Thanks for hanging out tonight. I appreciate all the questions in the chat room. And yeah, man, I mean, if it's a 14-team league, that's no joke. So like, if you can cover 8 points from Jamal Williams, and you're probably gonna have to start Rex Burkhead this weekend, which it's a really good matchup. Patriots going to Houston. I really like that matchup. They're one of the worst teams against the running back. And then CeeDee Lamb himself going up against Minnesota. He's got a pretty nice matchup this weekend too. Andy Dalton's back into the lineup. So I do think CeeDee Lamb does have a pretty high floor. CeeDee Lamb before Dak Prescott went down, CeeDee Lamb was one of the hottest rookie receivers in the league. So he kind of traded places with Chase Claypool. But I am open to CeeDee Lamb kind of being a serviceable wide receiver 3 the rest of the way. So if you can risk the trade, I think it's worth a spot to cover up those running backs, and then hopefully Raheem Mostert's back next week, and then maybe David Johnson in a week or 2. So you got some pretty good receivers. I would kind of I would roll with Galladay, Higgins, and then probably whip out CeeDee Lamb and see what happens with those running backs. Back to the waiver or the Roto World news here. Allen Lazard will be eased back into the lineup. So if you were hoping to start Allen Lazard this weekend, probably not the best time to do it. He's probably going to be on a limited snap count. I wouldn't expect too much out of him this weekend. They do play Chicago next Sunday Night Football, so I would imagine we see a little bit more Lazard in the matchup against Chicago there. We did mention Kenny Galladay returned to practice here, so this is really exciting news. We will have to monitor Matt Stafford. He's got the thumb in his throwing hand. He's got a ligament. I don't know if it's strained or pulled, but something definitely to monitor there. We'll see if Stafford can practice tomorrow or Friday. Panthers already ruled out Christian McCaffrey, so hopefully you got Mike Davis. Hopefully he can play better than he did last week, but really prime matchup there. I guess both the Carolina and the Detroit matchup, both running backs should be in a smash spot, whether you have DeAndre Swift or Mike Davis, two of the worst defenses against the running backs there, so that should be a really fun one to watch. Brashad Perriman limited today at Jets practice. They did say that Sam Darnold's out already for this game, so it's going to be more Joe Flacco to Brashad Perriman. So I'm actually open to Brashad Perriman being a wide receiver 3 flex. He's probably on a lot of people's waiver wire. So if you did need a wide receiver, I am open to Brashad Perriman maybe being a guy. I really don't know if we're going to see much Sam Darnold the rest of the way. They really don't have much of an incentive to play him. If he's already dinged up, what's the point of throwing him out there when they're basically trying to get the first overall pick anyways? And we see Brashad Perriman. He's been kind of in and out of the lineup all season. But the last time we saw him, 5 catches, 101 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 7 targets against the Patriots. He's one of the perfect complements to a Joe Flacco style passing game. If you think about some of the receivers Flacco has played with, he's hit John Brown, Torrey Smith, Steve Smith. He's got a lot of those, the vertical receivers, the big-bodied receivers. I think he complements Joe Flacco's game pretty well there. So I'm kind of into Brashad Perriman a little bit if you need the help at receiver. Drew Brees, we know he's not going to be back for at least 2-3 games. We'll see. The Saints still have not called who their starting quarterback is. So I don't know if you guys play. I play most of my leagues on ESPN where they have Taysom Hill listed as quarterback / tight end. So I'm considering starting, Taysom Hill at the tight end spot and hoping that maybe he throws the ball 5 or 6 times in that game against the Falcons. Again, Christian McCaffrey's not playing. We'll go through one more page here. But if anyone has any more questions in the chat room, I'll hang out for another minute or two. And then I got to go check out the NBA draft. So Drew Lock, he has the rib injury. He's going to try and play this week. Brett Rippon is the backup there. I honestly, at this point, I'd kind of like to see what Brett Rippon can do with Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, and Tim Patrick. Drew Lock did throw the 4 interceptions last weekend. He's probably not the quarterback of the future in Denver, so I'm a little bit nervous to see an injured Drew Lock with the rib injury. We'll see if he can practice the rest of the week. And then again, we kind of covered these Seahawk notes and the Kenyon Drake notes here, but Tyler Lockett did not practice yesterday. He got a limited practice in today, so he's going to play, but there's a bit of a knee sprain there, so we'll see if he can. Basically, if you have Tyler Lockett, he had the 53-point PPR game against the Cardinals back in Week 7. It just sucks because you almost have to play him in this one if he's going to play, and hopefully he can just get through this one healthy with no setbacks. Again, Carlos Hyde has been full participant yesterday and today. He's probably going to be the lead ball carrier tomorrow night. Chris Carson, they pretty much winked and said, hey, he's not going to play tomorrow night. We're going to roll with Hyde and Alex Collins. And then Kenyon Drake limited today. That's probably just an easy day for him as he's basically just preparing, after his first game back last Sunday. So he should be good to go tomorrow night. And then again, Matthew Stafford with the partial tear in his throwing hand. So hopefully he's getting his awful timing. He was just about to get Kenny Galladay back. They have a really juicy schedule for the rest of our fantasy playoffs. So hopefully Matt Stafford can tough it out in that one. He's one of the toughest quarterbacks in the league, though. He plays through quite a bit of injuries. So I'm hopeful that Matt Stafford is okay for Sunday. But we're going on almost 40 minutes here in the group here, and I think that's going to do it for the show tonight. I'm going to probably hop back on again tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. We're going to go over all my start-sit charts for week 11. We'll go over, I think there's 7 noon games, so I'll cover all the noon games, answer any questions, start-sit advice that you guys might need for me. And then Friday, we'll go live again at 6 p.m. Central Time. We'll go over all of the 3 o'clock games. We'll look at the Sunday night and the Monday night game. So we'll be busy the next 2 evenings. Come hang out with us again, 6 p.m. Central Time. If you're new to the YouTube channel, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and check out thefantasyfellowship.com. That's going to do it for tonight's show. Thanks for your time. That's probably the most important asset you have. So I'm very thankful for everyone hanging out in the chat room, whether that's Sunny Lar Mao, and we got Stephen Drakes, and we got ISO Only. A couple of these guys I'm starting to notice coming back to my channel. So I appreciate all you guys in the chat room, and have a good rest of your evening. We'll see you in another video. Peace.